Hello, welcome back. It is time for my best books of the year. I am so excited. I look forward to filming this video all year and I agonized over which books to put on this list. Some of them were no-brainers and others I really had to sit down and remind myself about the book and think about it and think, is this worth going on my best books of the year? So I have 10 books to talk about and I am going to coordinate them into genres. So there are 4 genres that make up this best books of the year. So thrillers, obviously, historical fiction, obviously, memoirs, no surprise there, and romance. I have 2 romance books on my best books of the year, which is mind-boggling to me because I don't read a whole lot of romance and I pretty much feel like they're all kind of the same. And it's just so nice to look around me at all of these books I have laying here and just know that they're all such good books and ones that I recommend. So let's start with romance. So starting with my second favorite romance book of the year, we have Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, and this is the second book in kind of a companion series. You don't have to, you can read them out of order, obviously. It's not a series, but there are some similar characters in this as characters in Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. And so this follows Brianna, and she's a doctor, and she meets this other doctor at her work, and Jacob is just this sweet, sensitive cinnamon roll character, and she doesn't like him at first because she thinks he's trying to take her job. So you have a little bit of a workplace romance, you also have a little bit of fake dating, you also have a little bit of forced proximity because they end up moving in together temporarily, and it kind of does a lot. Abby Jimenez does try to do a lot in her books, I will say that. Sometimes it might seem like too much, but it was all the tropes that I enjoyed, and they write letters to each other in this book, which I always really enjoy letters in books. And it's like if Grey's Anatomy was made into a romance novel, and I just really enjoyed it. And then my favorite romance of the year was The Friend Zone, also by Abby Jimenez. So this is, I believe, her debut novel, and it's the first in kind of a companion series of 3 that all kind of, again, follow similar characters. And I've read all 3 of them. This is the first one. It's by far my favorite. And this is about Kristen, who is helping her best friend plan her wedding. And so she has to do a lot of interacting with the best man, aka her friend's fiance's coworker, and he's a firefighter, and he's just, he's sarcastic, but he also has a sweet streak to him, and there's an adorable dog in here called Stuntman Mike, and the dog in itself is one of the best characters of this book. Definitely check the trigger warnings, but I saw so much of myself in Kristen, and I felt like Kristen was a little bit of a jerk, but definitely has a soft interior. You just have to get through the jerk to get to it, and sometimes I feel like that about myself. And make sure you grab your tissues when you sit down to read this, because I bawled. I sobbed my eyes out for a good hour while reading this book, after reading this book, thinking about this book the next day. It's definitely a tearjerker. Okay, next let's move on to memoirs. So I have 2 memoirs here that were the best ones I read this year. The first being Counting the Cost by Jill Duggar. And Jill Duggar is the oldest of the Duggar children, Jim, Bob, and Michelle Duggar, who have 19 kids, and they live in Arkansas. And I have followed the Duggar family for years. We used to kind of hate watch their show. But I also, as a child, was involved in a little bit of what the Duggar family believed. And luckily, my family got out of there real quick, but I definitely was able to commiserate with Jill and some of the religious trauma that she and her husband experienced, and some of the family trauma, and just hearing a lot of things that were going on behind the scenes that nobody ever knew. Everybody thought of them as this all-American idyllic family that wore skirts, and everybody was nice to each other, and the kids raised each other, and they were homeschooled, and they're just one big happy family, and that's obviously not what was going on. And we know now that that's not really what was happening. And so Jill talks a lot about things that nobody really knew, and things that happened, and how she healed from it. And she does narrate the audiobook herself, so that's pretty cool. But this was just really good, and it felt like girls hanging out, just talking and just grieving together and sharing trauma and healing together. And I really, really appreciated this. And I definitely think that this is worth reading. And then my favorite memoir of the year, I actually don't have with me physically because my dad's currently borrowing it, but it's Fly Girl by Anne Hood. And Anne Hood has written some other books. I've never read any of her other books, but when I heard about this memoir, I was super excited because I had a travel-based job for about 2 years. So I traveled a minimum of 3 days out of the week, every week pretty much. and I flew all over the country. And I know a couple of pilots and flight attendants who have always talked with me about their experience, but I really enjoyed hearing Anne Hood's experience as a flight attendant in the 70s. So that's what this book is about, her experience, how she became a flight attendant, the whole time she was a flight attendant, learning about being furloughed and what it looked like to do the galleys back then, and some of the exploitation that they had to go through as women working in the aviation industry. It was just so good. It was glamorous, it was gritty, it was easy to read. I think I read it in like 24 hours, and I understood a lot of the things that they were talking about, and I was also really shocked how little things have changed. Like, some things have changed a lot over the course of the years, but there's some things that are still the same, and I'm like, why are we still doing these things the same way we did in the 70s? Surely there must be a better way for the aviation industry to accomplish this thing. That's above my pay grade. I don't understand how any of that works, but it was a really good memoir, and I don't know that I'll pick up any of Anne Hood's fiction books, but I really, really enjoyed this memoir. Okay, now we've come to my top 2 genres. So I have 2 historical fiction books here to talk about. I have one that I have here with me physically, and the other one I do not own physically yet, but I do want to when I see it. I just haven't seen it in a bookstore yet. But the first book, this is actually a little bit of a spoiler for a video that I have coming out at the end of the month, where I'll be reporting back on my 5-star predictions that I'm doing with Lindsay's Little Library and Sarah's Nightstand, and this is one of those books. So The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna was in fact a 5-star and quickly made its way to my best books of the year. I actually just finished this book like 2 days ago, and it was so good. I mean, first of all, look at that cover. It's a chunker, but I had heard about this book for years, and I heard that this book was just like so sad and so heartbreaking, and so I started reading it, and at first I was like, I don't know if I get the hype. This is about a family that consists of a father and a mother and a daughter, Lenny, and the father is suffering from PTSD from the war. So he was in Vietnam, and I believe he was a prisoner of war, and he suffers severely with PTSD from the war, and it's basically changed and made him a whole different person. And they get this opportunity to go to Alaska and kind of homestead, and because they're down on their luck and the dad can't keep a job, they decide to go. And so it's a lot about living off the grid and what it was like back in the 70s to live in the last frontier of Alaska, and to experience Alaska as tourists were starting to go there and everybody was trying to see the beauty of Alaska. So one of the great things about this is that Alaska itself was like a character in the book. And they talk about the percentage of people that would go to Alaska and then leave after a year, and the number of people that would go missing during the winter just because they couldn't handle the frigid temperatures or the treacherous weather that they experienced there in the winter. There's a lot of trigger warnings in this book for sure, but it's basically a coming of age story. You follow Lenny as she tries to navigate being a teenager and helping her mother navigate her father's moods and his spells and just some of the crazy stuff that he comes up with to do and to put them through. And there are 2 really tear-jerking scenes that I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And I was actually driving and listening to this book, and I actually had to pull over because I couldn't see straight because I was crying so hard. But the one thing I will say about this book is that for the first 3/4 of this, there was like no redeeming qualities. It was just constant sadness. And so I was a little bit worried, but the last quarter definitely makes up for it. And it felt like real life. It didn't feel like hardship, 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 and then happy ending and everything's fine. That's not real life, and I like that this wasn't like that. I was satisfied with the ending, but I didn't feel like it was wrapped up with a bow and everything was great again, which I appreciate because that's not real life. So this book was definitely a tearjerker, definitely get your tissues handy, and I think it's worth the read. Don't be afraid by how chunky it is. It felt like it moved along pretty well. And then my favorite historical fiction book of the year is Only the Beautiful by Susan Meisner, and I learned about this during the BookTube Besties reading retreat that I attended this summer. It was a virtual reading retreat, and there was a point in time where we were all able to recommend a book, and I heard the words asylum and pregnant teen, and I was like, yep, add to Goodreads. So this book is about Rosie, and Rosie grows up on a vineyard. Her parents work as winemakers on this vineyard, and her parents pass away, and the owners of the vineyard decide to take her in as like a housemaid to work for them. Well, she turns up pregnant and gets sent away. She thinks she's being sent to a home for unwed mothers, and it actually turns out to be an asylum because Rosie has synesthesia, which is where you see colors when you hear sounds. So every sound, music, people's voices, they have a color in her head that she sees and nobody else does. And her parents always told her to keep it a secret because this is back during World War II time frame and nobody really understood what it was. They were always worried she would be exploited because of her synesthesia, and it turns out they were right. She ended up being used at this asylum for different experiments and things like that, and she gave birth in the asylum and her baby was taken from her. And this is the closest I've been able to find to The Lost Girls of Willowbrook by Ellen Marie Wiseman, just with the reality of asylums in our country. And the things that she went through were just horrific. So you have that point of view, but then you also have the point of view of a girl named Helen who is living as an au pair. And it kind of reminds me of The Sound of Music because she starts smuggling disabled children out of Vienna, basically escape the Germans coming in and taking elderly and people with disabilities and euthanizing them or putting them in asylums. And so she starts smuggling these children out of the country. And eventually her path and Rosie's path kind of converge in a very unique way. And it was just so good. There's a lot of layers to it, but it didn't feel like it was giving me whiplash. I didn't feel like there was too many characters. I didn't feel like it was going in too many directions. It was pretty fast paced and it spanned a pretty long period of time, but was still able to be descriptive. So I really like that. This is the first book I've read by Susan Meisner, and I do have a couple others on my Goodreads Want to Read shelf that I plan on picking up when I see them. I actually haven't seen any Susan Meisner book in any of the bookstores that I've been at. I go to a lot of used bookstores and I look for them, but I haven't found any yet. So Only the Beautiful was my favorite historical fiction book that I read this year. Okay, now we are down to the thrillers, and I have 4 thrillers that I think were the best ones that I read this year. The first being The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. Now, is this an earth-shattering story that nobody's ever heard of? No. Is this similar to some other popcorn thrillers about having housemaids that you have read? Probably. But it's so fast-paced, it keeps things moving, it's fun, it was enjoyable, it kept me guessing, and even though I kind of like saw the twist coming, the way it led into the twist was pretty good. So this girl becomes a housemaid for the Winchester family, and the Winchesters are kind of strange. The wife, Nina, kind of says one thing and does another. Like she'll say, oh, our daughter's allergic to peanut butter, and then the daughter will be like, what? No, I'm not. Or Nina will like purposely pull things out and make a mess of things and then be like, oh, maid, clean this up. And they treat her pretty bad, but she needs this job, so she kind of overlooks the way they're treating her. And then you have the husband who's kind of flirting with her a little bit, and the first half of the book and the second half are like pretty different, but you understand why they are the way they are. Is this a perfect book? No, but it got me out of a reading slump. It was a very fast read, and it was just fun. That's how I would describe this book. Just fun and thrilling. Not going to be the literary masterpiece of all time, but just fun. Next we have Gone Tonight by Sarah Pekkanen, and I've read Sarah Pekkanen when she wrote books with Greer Hendricks, and I like some of them, didn't like others, but this I definitely enjoyed, and I hope that Sarah Pekkanen continues to write some of her own books because I felt like I liked this writing style even better than when she wrote with Greer Hendricks. And this is about a woman and daughter, and the daughter works at a residential care home for adults, and she learns that her mother has been diagnosed with dementia, so she is trying to put her whole life on hold to take care of her mother, but her mother has some secrets of her own that she's not telling her daughter, and the early onset dementia is only the start of what we have going on between this mother and daughter. There's secrets, there's distrust, and it takes place in like the DMV area, DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And so I understood like exactly what they were talking about when they were talking about a lot of these places in this book. And this is one of those like how far would you go for your family types of tropes, because the mother and the daughter both have to go to some pretty intense lengths to save each other and to keep each other safe and to continue this really strong bond that they have. Next we have The Last Word by Taylor Adams. This book is about a woman who is house sitting in the Pacific Northwest, and she is a book reviewer. So she reads this book and it's terrible. She gives it a 1-star review and writes a review about how she doesn't like it. Well, the author comments on that and says like, hey, can you take it down? Like, you know, you weren't the target audience for this, and, you know, kind of rude to her. And she's like, no, I'm not taking down my review. Like, these are my thoughts. And the author was like, no, take it down. And she's like, no. And she thought that was the end of it. And then she starts having these weird things happen at the house where she's house sitting, and she thinks that the author has come for her and come to kill her, which is just so funny because I've talked to some other booktubers as well, and I feel like we all relate to this a little bit because I think we all worry when we give a book a bad review, like what the recourse is going to be. Will our subscribers be upset with us? Will the author be upset with us if they were to ever see the review? Are they going to come for me? I don't know. Hopefully not. But something else that was fun about this book was the main character has a golden retriever, and she like thinks about what her golden retriever is saying, and then over the course of the book it's like the golden retriever has a voice. And I feel like we all do that. If you're a dog parent, you know, we give our dogs a voice, and that voice is your dog's voice, and you like talk for them based on what you think they would say. You know, I'm not crazy. People understand what I'm talking about when I say that, right? Please let me know in the comments. But this is one of those where it's just twist after twist after twist, and you think she's gonna get out and then something happens and she doesn't, and you think she's gonna get out and then something happens and she doesn't, and then she finds a key and then the key breaks in the lock, and all of these different things, and it's just one thing after another. But I was along for the ride and I enjoyed it, and the ending of this was pretty cool. It had a good twist at the end, and I just had no idea what to expect from this, and it definitely exceeded my expectations. All right, we have come to my favorite book of the year, and I don't think anybody's gonna be surprised, but it is We Spread by Ian Reid. First of all, that cover, I mean, oh my gosh, amazing. But this is, I think it's considered a social horror, technically, not even a thriller, which I would say is not my genre because we all know how I felt about Comfort Me with Apples. This was just so good. It's a kind of stream of consciousness, like fever dream about the horrors of aging. Penny finds herself in an assisted living home after her husband passes away, and some strange things start happening, and she's not sure if she can trust her own memory or not. People keep telling her like, no, you just had a bath yesterday, we're not here for this, or no, this happened, and she says things that people tell her are not true, or people tell her things and she was like, what? And she's not sure if the horrors are in the home and in the people taking care of her or in her own brain. And I sobbed when I read this. It had a crazy ending. I know some people just can't get down with the writing style and just how kind of like weird it is, but I almost thought of it as poetry, if that makes any sense. I don't know. And you fly through it. I mean, it's very, very short chapters, very like split up. It's only like maybe 200 pages, 250. And also, look at Ian Reid's dog. Oh my goodness. I haven't read anything else by Ian Reid, but I definitely want to. And this is not something that I typically read or would like, but it just, I don't know if it was because of my circumstances at the time, the place I was in my life, the things I had going on with my family that just really made this book hit home for me, but I really, really enjoyed it. Like, enjoyed it isn't the right word because it's so sad, but I read this because Ashley from Ashley's Little Library loved it. It was one of her favorite books of 2022, and I read this in my vlog for reading booktubers' favorite books of 2022, and now here it is on mine. And like, I just can't stop looking at that cover. Like, it's beautiful. All right, those are my favorite books that I read in 2023, and I'm about to drop all of these. I've been talking for 32 minutes, so this will be interesting in editing. But thank you so much for your continued support on my channel throughout the year. I love talking with you in the comments, so please let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these books and what did you think of them. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye!